Really mainly about thanking a few people who are in this room. And so I'll get started with that. Really just to say, I'm really deeply honored for this, but there obviously was some kind of mistake. I want to say that I still feel like I'm a newcomer to the field because I didn't come to the field at the beginning of my career. So I had a couple of years before I had my PhD, and those years, if you look at the kind of stuff I was doing, I mean, I was test driving electric cars, I was doing approximate dynamic programming for the economic value, let's tell you how old this is, of the space shuttle. This was before any space shuttles were even launched. And then after my PhD, my immediate work was mainly in optimization and statistics, not in simulation. And so what happened was, when I decided I want to become an academic, this is after a career in consulting and industrial research, Cornell, my alma mater, took me back for me to sort of retread myself over a period of 3 years. And during that time, Lee Shrubin introduced me to the simulation community. So I'm sorry Lee's not here, but I have to say thank you, Lee, for that. The first simulation conference I went to was my first year at Cornell, and that conference was held in the Ritz-Carlton in Buckhead in Atlanta. In those days, the conference was a bit smaller, and we went to really high-end hotels. I mean, that place, you had to wear a jacket if you were in the lobby after 5 p.m. And so I showed up there with Lee, and this guy, Gordon Clark, who I'd never met before, greeted me, and he took me around and introduced me to many of the senior members in simulation, including Bob Sargent at that time. So I did have a paper there. The paper was on testing strategies for simulation optimization, but the great thing for me about that meeting was I found my home, because our group is just really special. I had been in the optimization community before that, and it's not special. So, what I just had to show a little nerd-like thing, especially since Shane is here and we can talk about SimOpt a little bit. Actually, that first paper was testing strategies for simulation optimization. The little picture on the left shows all the things you need to think about when you're doing testing for simulation. And the picture on the right was special to me because the top picture shows, sorry, this is nerd-like. Top picture shows contours for Rosenbrock's function, which is often used for testing optimization methods. And the problem is that with Rosenbrock's function, you quickly get to a region that's approximately quadratic, so quadratic solvers are always going to win. But that's not really the kind of thing we typically operate with, so I made up a fake function. It's called a pseudo function, and so it's a continuously decreasing ramp that you can use to test functions, and you can sort of like measure revolutions per function evaluation, something like that. So that's what that paper was about. And still, I can't believe it was 37 years ago. I have to say a little bit more about my thanks to Lee Shrubin. So my first interaction with Lee was actually getting out of his class. So in order to graduate at Cornell, you had to have a certain number of classes. And I had all of them but 2. And the 2 I didn't have is the area I work in. So simulation and design of experiments. So I have to say, I'm okay now because when I came back to Cornell, after my PhD, I took both those courses. So my next interaction with him was when I was back there, and that's when I was introduced to the simulation community. And as Barry already said, I had been doing this graphical design of experiments, but Lee was the one who really encouraged me to pursue that and go further with it. We actually had a paper together on that. That was at the 1989 simulation conference at the top. And then the second thing that Lee did was he shared with me, he was an incredible idea generator. And so at the 1992 Winter Simulation Conference, Lee said to me, hey, I have this idea, you know, we don't really characterize the input distributions correctly, so let's resample the input distribution. There was one twist we had to make on it to make it work, because he wanted to resample the input distribution every time you requested a random variant. that doesn't work. You get exactly the same results that you would get without doing that. So you have to resample it between runs or between batches. And our first paper on that was the very next year. And this picture over here, at that time, shows what happens if you ran an experiment based on a sample of data, assuming, and with replications, assuming that you had the distribution right. And then if you did that experiment, you would see low variability. And what happens with truly, if you truly took a sample of that size again and ran replications, with a different sample, you might get a very different result. So that was the first paper that we had talking about why getting the input model uncertainty included in the characterization was important. So I just want to say thank you, Lee, for not just this work, but also an awful lot of fun. He is a fun guy. So my second special appreciation is to Barry. So Barry talked about it a little bit before, so the input model uncertainty sort of next quantum step, I would say, was working with Barry. So in 2000, and this was through a couple of sabbaticals. So in 2008, Barry came to Penn State for a short period. I forget, it was a week or two, something like that. And we were trying to figure out something to do. And I may be exaggerating, but Barry, please agree with me. I think in a half an hour, we got the first pieces of the idea for meta-model assisted input uncertainty, like in a half hour. You want to do something with meta-models, I remember that. This, I pulled up from my old notes from around 2008 or 2009, which were our decision about how we were going to go about writing a paper and doing the research. So that was what led to the work that we did with Wei from 2010 to 2016. But like it says on the bottom, the most important result from that work was the friendship with Barry and Jean. So that was just a terrific thing that continues on. By the way, State College is a pretty place. That was taken when Barry and Jean were out in State College. Okay, so thanks, Barry.
More than welcome.
Oh, and congratulations also on your Saul Gass Expository Writing Award. So that's one more thing I have to say about Barry, that one of the things that I've learned in working with Barry is he is just a superb writer. So when you're doing research, the research ideas come out of Barry well-formed. I mean, the way he writes, it just makes things very clear. So I've learned from that too, so I appreciate it. I also have special appreciation for Susan Sanchez. So first place, we're both Cornell ORE PhD alumni. And we're both were advised by statisticians. So her advisor was Bob Beckhofer, mine was Bruce Turnbull. And of course, you know all the things that Susan has done, longtime leader in all kinds of aspects, a titan, and more. But I want to talk about a different thing. Back in, I guess it was 2004, Susan was president of I-Sim. Wasn't called that at the time, it was called Informs College on Simulation. Mm-hmm. And she led us through the transition to being a society. Now, there were many people involved in that. Bob Sargent sitting back there, he was one of the people involved, and there were others, but well, I might as well just put the symbol in. So we changed to the Simulation Society, and there were a lot of details that had to be handled, and a lot of constituencies to make happy, including, you know, head of Informs people, and she was just terrific at that. So that was helpful for me because I was the incoming president for the following year. So I really had a chance to see calmness, consideration, logic, really affect, and an ability to get things done. Thank you, Susan. Okay. My final special appreciation is for Bob Sargent. So I do get a picture of Lee in there too. So Bob was also a mentor for me, like Susan, for my service activities. And the most recent one there, I would say, is the service activities for the Simulation Archive. But before that, Bob has done all kinds of things for our community, as has Barry, frankly, in trying to make the community well-known and well-respected, as many others, including Jim Wilson. One of the things they were really effective at was back in 2002, the Informs Fellow Award was created. And so, again, these folks trying to improve the visibility and recognition for simulationists resulted in us getting 13 fellows in the first 7 years. So that was an important initiative. Most of the people in this room are too young to remember a point when the simulation community was looked at as the ugly stepchild of the operations research community. And that has changed a lot. In fact, one of the exciting things for that is the time that Michael Fu and I spent at the National Science Foundation. So the only other thing I wanted to say was, Bob, do you remember our trip to St. Petersburg?
Of course, and I remember and the longest night of the year, remember we did a boat ride?
Yeah.
It was June 21st, we was there, and we took a boat ride with some people we couldn't even speak the language, and we went around by the canal, they drove us back to the hotel.
Yeah, we were drunk.
And you go town hall to go to the symphony, right?
So I'm going to tell, so we went to the opera, actually, while we were there. So the Mariinsky Theater is a famous opera house in St. Petersburg, and I put this little mark here, I don't know if you can see it, but that's where Bob and I sat. And the thing was so weird about it was right in front of us was this like biggest acorn that I ever saw, because it was the top of the cupola for the Tsar's seat. So we sat right above the Tsar at that event. But thank you, Bob, for all that you've done for the community, and today was just another demonstration of that.
I'm very honored to help you.
Okay, so last appreciation is really to all of you. And as I said before, we are a very special community. And I mean not just the senior folks here, the mid-career folks, folks from industry. I mean, I'll tell one tiny story, and that is the folks who at that time were at systems modeling helped me establish a course on using simulation models for engineering design, providing me with real industrial simulation model for my students to exercise. I should also acknowledge again Lee Shrubin and Dave Goldsman, because those fellows also ran the course at their institutions. So the only thing I would say beyond that for this community that we have is for the more junior people, please try and do what I'm trying to do, and that's pay it forward. So you find yourself in a kind community. The only way that's maintained is by putting the kind energy into it. Okay, so Barry already said this. You know, I have 3 wonderful things at once. Well, maybe it's not exactly at once, but it's pretty close to being at once, given how old I am. And that book is also on Amazon. Look, the other book I get nothing for, by the way. That's just Springer gets all the money. This one I get money. So if you buy that book, you can write a review on Amazon. However, I have to say, this has happened to me twice before. And I have photographic evidence to prove it. Okay, first time, I was 6 years old. That's a long time ago, folks. So what happened back then was, in all of the houses that I knew, nobody had air conditioning. So you just have these screens in the windows, and the doors getting open all the time, and there's a lot of flies. I mean, there were just a ton of flies. Well, one day, I took the fly swatter, and I hit 3 flies at once on the screen. I killed 3 flies at once. So this is a thing, many of you are parents, and so all I have to say is, I'm so happy my mom humored me. So my mom, she took a picture because I was so proud of that. So I'm holding the fly swatter because I killed 3 flies with 1 swat. Now, the second time though, is because of these three over here. So that's a picture of Robin and me. It's right near the time that I had that weed in my mouth. I'm not saying what kind of a weed it was. And so, of course, with Jenny and Maureen come a family too, and I can talk about them in just a minute here. So thank you all for listening. I want to talk about what's next before I totally quit. Because I am totally quitting, by the way, at the end of June this year. I'll be retiring. So I won't be quitting research, though. I was talking earlier today about a paper that I have with Max Morris. It just got accepted in Technometrics. And I started working on that paper in 2002. So that's 22 years. So there's probably some that are going to be a while yet before I get them out. And these are some of the places that I'm collaborating with at the moment. And then with our wonderful daughters come wonderful husbands and grandkids. So there's a lot of fun things going on with the grandkids right now too. And last, we like to travel. So that's, by the way, that Russell Hotel is not the famous one, and I'm never going to stay in that Russell Hotel. All right, that's it. The end. Thank you very much.